All right, so I've been challenged by my Facebook groups to demonstrate how I outline. Now, this is a bit awkward, actually, because you need to be prepared and so on, and who's ever prepared for outlining? That's not the purpose. Outlining is a very personal process. It's something that you do for yourself and nobody else ever sees. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate my outlining process, and I'm going to make it public, which is going to make me self-conscious about it, which is going to change the way I do it. So I'll try to be as realistic as possible. And I'm going to begin that I've got several notes that I want to cover. So people ask me, how do I begin writing? And the answer is I don't. I outline. And this is true whether I'm writing a fiction novel, a short story, a nonfiction book, a blog, a Facebook post, or most any complex activity where I've got to get organized before I go ahead and do it. But let's stick to writing. Writing, to me, is really a two-phase process. There's the outlining process. This is where you design the story at a high level. You make sure that all the pieces are going to fit together, that it's going to make sense, that it's going to be the right length, that it's got a good conclusion, it's got a good opening, and it's got grabbing things. You're designing all of these things at a high level. During the writing process, you're using the best words and the best orders to express an idea. Now, I love both of these processes. Outlining is fun, designing your plot and who your characters are and where your world's going to be. And then writing is fun. Using the best words in the best order to express an idea, I love that. When you come up with something that's almost poetic, is what I really like in the writing process. Now, this came really from my software development background, in which there were two phases. First, you would design the software, so you'd figure out its purpose. Bring this over to outlining a story. What is the story's purpose? What are you trying to evoke? Usually some emotion from your reader. And then you worry later about the coding or the implementation of it. How are you going to achieve this now? Both are fun. They are a blast. I love highlighting at a high level, or outlining at a high level, and I love writing at a detailed level, but I definitely split the two. Now you hear the stories like, well, Stephen King doesn't believe in highlighting. He's just a seat of the pantser. He likes to hear or have the story unfold for him as he writes it. And just because a writer can become successful by overcoming his bad habits doesn't mean that you should follow them all, including his bad habits. This is along the lines of, I wonder how much better a guitarist Jimi Hendrix would have been if he hadn't been a heroin addict. How much better would Stephen King be if he'd actually learned how to outline? I'm not going to complain that Stephen King's doing anything wrong. He's my favorite writer and probably the biggest writer of my generation. Now, some say that they don't outline, but they keep Bibles. And the point is, what they're doing is they're recognizing one of the things of outlining is get it out of your head, write it down on a piece of paper so you don't have to think about it, so you can apply your brain to other things. So they use Bibles, right? They'll write who certain characters are, certain foibles they've got, certain places in town, so some stuff about the world, and they'll say they're not outlining. But in my world, they're outlining. They're just doing it very, very minimalistically. And that's not bad, because what you need to do is you need to outline to the extent that you need it and no more. Once it becomes a chore and it's not helping you anymore, then you stop doing it. And the other thing I want to point out is remember that by outlining and then writing, you're not losing out on the fun of discovering where the story is taking you, right? People argue that, well, I like to write by the seat of my pants because I want to know what the story is and I want to have it unfold as I write. You're just moving that to a separate phase. That's called the outlining process now. So the outlining process is a blast and it's fun because you're doing that, but you're doing it in very short chunks and you are getting an intense dose of the entire story and it's fun. Writing, you can set all those worries aside, right? You've written them down. You no longer need them in your mind. so you can concentrate on putting the best words together in the best order to express an idea. Now, before I get into it, the last words that I want to say is, here is my, you think, okay, so outlining, he's big into outlining, he must be using Scrivener cork boards or some Word plugin or some separate device or software to outline. I use a simple text editor, in my case Emacs, which isn't quite as simple, but you could use Notepad. You could use Word itself or Scrivener if you like, but use it in a simple dumbed down way that I'm about to show you. You do not need a sophisticated editor to outline. And how I outline? Sloppy and quick. According to the outlines that I've gotten from my course on Udemy, I found that I'm apparently not getting this point through, that you are the only person that's going to see the outline. There's no reason to format it and make it look like a Word document. It's got to be ugly. It's got to be partial sentences and just scribbled ideas. You could actually do this on a piece of paper and with a pencil, but I'd recommend using a text editor. My outlines are mine alone. Nobody else is going to see them. Don't make them clean. Make them useful. And the other thing is that outlines change as you're writing. So don't think that there's a clear line, the cement wall barrier between outlining and writing. There isn't, because as you start writing, you go, there's these problems with the outline. I need to change that. And you flip over into outline mode and you do that quickly. So you're constantly changing your outline as you write. It is not set in concrete. And with that said, I want to start showing you how I'm going to outline. And one of the reasons that I made this little outline in itself was so that I could make sure to cover all of these things. So we're going to begin with fiction. I am going to edit a text document in my text editor, which is Emacs, and we're going to make it a fiction outline. Now, the first thing that I consider when it comes to fiction is that you have three things that you need to address. The first is, I call them the 3 Ps. I finally made it to. I've changed the words a lot, but now Ps work great for me. This is plot, and I want you to write this down. This is the beginning of your outline. People and places. These are the things that you need to outline. You need to get a general idea of what are going to be the people and the places in your story, and of course, the plot. But then, now notice, one of the things I tried to resist doing ahead of time in doing this is coming up with a plot and just regurgitating it for you. So I have no idea what this story is about. And that could slow me down a little bit as I've got to think of plot elements and stuff like that. But plots typically have this structure. Now I'm going to write this down. Most of the time I don't write this, I think of it. But they've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what that means is that you build up a certain storyline. You set who the people are. You set where the locations are. What is the background of everybody? And then there's this middle part where tension builds to usually a critical ending, which is where everything gets resolved at the end. So this is a standard structure for stories, but not only stories, but subplots. Now, here's the difference between writing a short story and a novel. A short story, which I've got outlined right now, can typically introduce one idea, gives you some words about it, and then concludes the idea. A novel has many of these short stories in it. If you try to write an 80,000-word novel, you're going to have subplots and this person's backstory and all of these things. Now, earlier in a Facebook group, and I'll make sure it's available here, I posted an idea where you use Emacs, or rather Excel, to keep track of your subplots over the entire history of a novel. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. First, I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go over to my subplots thing, and this is what I'm talking about. So let's say you have a book. That's this first line up here. And the book has 18 chapters. So we list them apart with 3 spaces in between. And then we go, okay, now I've got a subplot. This subplot is the love relationship between the hero and the heroine. Now, it's going to pick up fairly heavily. That's what 2 X's mean. 3 X's mean heavily. This is moderate, and 1 X is light. So it fades out by chapter 2. By chapter 5, it's back a little. So in a way, you could use a text file, just as I'm doing right here, and I'll make this available to you, to actually outline mini plots. So the beginning, the middles, and the ends of your subplots, which you're going to use to make a book. Now, that's the big difference between a novel and a short story. Short story, you're going to get one of them, so we are in short story mode right here. Now, let's throw out things. All I'm going to do is I'm going to brainstorm and what comes to mind. Let's say places. I would like this to be a bedroom in a high-end apartment. Maybe I like the idea of New York. So you're just throwing these things out. This is places, people. Okay, I'm going to have this be a creepy scene. So the people are going to be a man and a wife. And I'm doing a short story here, so I don't even care what their names are. Let's see, what can I say about them? They are dressed well, okay? Now, what I've made it to here is a subcategory of people. And what I do sometimes to categorize these, so I'll take the first one and I'll use spaces here and I'll keep this left justified. But now I'm about to describe the man. So I'll indent this too. And I'll say, man, dressed in evening clothes. And he's thin. Okay, the wife dressed in a fine white dress. I'm beginning to picture these things in my mind, so I'm just throwing them out. These are the people that are in my story. She's seated at a, what do they call them? A makeup table. What do they call them? An armoire? No, not an armoire. I don't know what they call them. So that's good for that. Now, here I've got beginning, middle, end. How are we going to set this story up? First of all, I'm getting this idea. So a man steps into the room. Let's use this as the beginning. Husband steps into room, right? No acknowledgement from wife. Okay? And then the middle. Walks over and touches her shoulder. Hand comes away with blood. And the conclusion is he hears someone behind him. There we go. Now that's a good little plot for a short story. And I've got a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. I've got various people. Now I just keep plowing away probably at the people and the places. New York, we're not going to get to see a lot of New York. What can we say about the place? Fine furniture. Cool in the room. Okay? This is absolutely quiet. So we just start throwing all these words out to describe these things. And notice how now we're getting a plot and so on. Now these details come into play. Let's say we want to, remember, this is our outline. We can do anything I want. I like to use 5 dashes as a divider. And then down here, I might write using some of the things that I've done. Let's just call him the husband. Stepped into the cool bedroom and was surprised that his wife failed to acknowledge his presence. Now, if the husband is smoking, is other great things, we can say smokes, smells of smoke, afraid wife might find out he's smoking again. So you put all of these details in here. So I could have him, I could make the second sentence here refer to he was concerned his wife might smell the lingering smoke on his clothes. Something like that. And notice how this is adding depth to your narrative. So this is stuff, and also notice that I'm outlining and writing at the same time. I can kind of intermix them. So I can experiment with things in my outline that I might use later when I actually write. Now, let's take a look at nonfiction. Okay, so we've got short and long fiction, and the difference being, right, that you're going to have to, with long fiction, have all of these subplots and do the same thing with them, basically. It becomes a huge data management effort. Whereas a short story, you get to experiment with something a little shorter. Let's try a nonfiction. Now, nonfictions differ from fiction in that you don't care about plot, people, and places anymore. What you care about, okay, let's begin with short fiction. So we're talking about writing a Facebook post, a blog post, something like that. You usually have, this is it, beginning, middle, end. There's our outline. Now in the beginning, what are you trying to do? You're making an argument. In the middle, this is almost like writing an essay, by the way. It is really an essay layout. In the middle, you're writing supporting details. And then in the end, you're reiterating your argument. So with that kind of outline and structure, what you do is you usually begin here with what is the point I want to make? What is the argument that I want to make? Let's say that we're going to make the argument that smog is bad for you. Okay, so we have this initial argument. They're going to, well, what does it do? It's unhealthy for your lungs. It stains things. I don't know. You'd come up with a whole bunch of arguments for why smog is bad for you, and then you'd reiterate, for all these reasons and more, smog is the enemy of mankind. Make it dramatic, right? So you'd have a conclusion like that. Anyway, that's a quick look at how you might outline a nonfiction work. Now let's go back to our original outline. It's called outline, and make sure that we got everything. What were we going to talk about? Fiction novel. All right. You have to have those subplots. Short story, much easier. Nonfiction book. Nonfiction book. We did blog and Facebook, and you can see how virtually any activity that involves planning could work into this. Let's go back and look a little bit at a nonfiction book. Now here, what you have is many topics and areas. And what I like to do is I like to number when it comes to something really complicated. So I'll go 1. Most things have an introduction. So let's give the first chapter of this story introduction. And then I'm going to say 2 is going to be how to install. This is also the way that I outline Udemy courses. So I'll go, okay, how to install. What introduction do we need? We need 1.1, a course or book overview. Overview of the book contents. Maybe number 2, I'd like additional resources. So what you're doing is you're throwing out ideas and trying to organize them into a structure of this beginning, middle, end. Now, the middle is much larger in nonfiction books, obviously, than Facebook posts or blog posts. And that's the big difference. And that's why I like to use this hierarchy. You can also use it as when students or readers take or read your book, they can reference the number to get you more specific to what they're talking about. So they'll say, oh, hey, in section 1.2, you said, and that'll help you find out where they are in a rather large work. So there you go. That's how I outline. I hope it helps. And I'm going to quit this now because it's been too long. I'll see you in the next course.